Oh, can I go on another little riff here?
Yes, and I'll try and remember. I mean, I'll just scribble. Yes, go.
Okay, and that's that Robert J. Lifton wrote this amazing book called The Nazi Doctors, and he wanted to know how it is that people who were physicians who had taken the Hippocratic Oath could go in and participate in a death camp or death camps. And what he discovered was that many of the doctors actually did the best they could do for the Jews under their care within the specific confines. Okay, the thing they never did, they would honestly do the best they could so long as they didn't have to question the Auschwitz reality. So within the tools that they were given, which is they might have one aspirin that somebody can lick or whatever, many of them would attempt to actually be kind. But the big thing is they never questioned factory death camps. They never questioned starving them to death. And so what they would end up doing, for example, is if somebody got typhus, it's in the best interest, they said, to then go ahead and kill that person because typhus is a communicable disease. So my point is that so long as you stay within this restrictive mindset, so long as you question the frame, so long as you don't question the frame that's been given to you by the oppressors, by whomever, by the one who's setting up the situation, then your behavior, you can be as wonderful and nice and groovy as you can be, and you're still going to be committing atrocities and you're still going to be insane because you're not questioning the larger reality. Yeah,
because I think one of the things I've been ruminating about a lot too, also, and that's what the Talk at Pioneers was about too, is like, let's go back to roots, to how we got to this extreme cartoon of humorless greed and cruelty, which is so manifest right now. But let's go back to where, we can go back 30 years, we can go back 30,000 years, and I think it's important to do that. What you bring up also too, I do like the model that on some level we shouldn't take our families personally, that they are research projects given to us at birth saying, what does our culture encourage or discourage men from, to cultivate in 1954 or whatever.
Right.
And that, Robert Bly said something years ago that I caught on to. He was talking about the value of myth and initiation and ritual, because he said sometimes, and this is the idea of families giving birth to their medicine people and cultures giving birth to their medicine people, and we aspire to be that. But the issue is how to not drown in the poison that we take on. Mm-hmm. And so he was saying, in a family, sometimes a child will come along who is the keeper of their father's soul. That would be understood in a mythological context, but without the myth, the father just has a kind of enraged desire to sexually, but there's no myth. And again, that idea of the death and resurrection show, that all rituals and theater are intrinsically shamanistic, but we've lost that. So when we go to any event, personal, family, or collective now, like a rock show, part of us knows that something extraordinary and profound was supposed to happen, but it didn't. And then we go, well, maybe louder, or more violent, or more extreme, because I don't feel what should have happened. Again, and I think we want to kind of address that, like by taking it back, that we're being fed toxic mimics.
Yep.
Violence is a toxic mimic of union. We're being fed violent mimics of, public spectacle and...
Well, violence is a toxic mimic of violence.
Okay, well, take us there.
Because violence is part of the world. And I think that, I'm not looking to attempt to eradicate violence. I've got, dead flies all over my room hanging in spider webs. And that's simply a part of life. But that violence, I was just putting in a middle step. I totally agree that violence is a toxic mimic of union. I was just putting in another step that violence in the natural world can be a form of union. And I've actually experienced that. Yeah, and actually one thing I wanted to ask you too, Carolyn, because we have so many shared simple pleasures in Dogland and Quandaries. And Carolyn Ravensburg, a great ally of both of ours, was saying about how you had an experience with your dogs in the wood in which they caught a rat, and then you said no, and you sort of saved the rat, and it hobbled off, and then you wondered, maybe that rat had a pact with those dogs. Maybe death was... I had done a terrible thing. Yeah, I'm sitting there. Actually, it was not just dogs. I had 2 dogs and 3 cats sitting next to me, right next to a pond, and this rat comes walking up to us, and then the dog started after it, and I called them back, and the rat jumped into the pond, swam across, and then it was listing hard to starboard as it walked away. I mean, it was in bad shape. And I was thinking that I just stopped an assisted suicide.
Right.
And what a terrible thing, because, the rat had obviously gotten up the nerve. I mean, what sort of rat what is a rat going to do? What is a rat doing if it walks up to a human and 2 dogs and 3 cats? And what's the obvious thing that it's attempting to do? And then, of course, it ran, because at the last moment, a lot of times our nerves break. But had I not stopped the dogs, it would have still had it. And I'm sorry, go ahead. No,
well, it's just an interesting conundrum. I mean, I disagree with my dogs about very few things, but one is what smells good, and they think foxcat is just fantastic. And also the killing, yes, because I remember running up to my dog, as the shaking woodchuck, going, no, and he's like, no, are you crazy? What do you mean, no, don't eat the woodchuck? But it was something natural in us too. I mean, anyway.
Well, that actually, this is another one of the things I'm really excited about, is that a couple years ago, a tree told me what the fundamental predator-prey relationship is. Because I did a radio show in Spokane, and the guy on the radio said, Indians exploited salmon too. And I said, no, they didn't. They ate them. He said, what's the difference? I said, well, they gave respect for the spirit in exchange for the flesh. I knew it was kind of crap when I said it, but... No.
Okay, well, anyway, keep going.
But the point is, I knew that that's true, but I knew that's not it. I knew there was something else. So I went off, and I was sitting next to this tree, and I asked the tree the question, so what is the exchange? And the tree gave me the answer so directly, which was, if you consume the flesh of another, you take responsibility for the continuation of that community.
Good.
So yes, I agree that there's that exchange. That's so true. But then it's the bigger thing, and that's true on a moral, spiritual level. And it's also true on a physical level, because if I consume the flesh of salmon and I don't take responsibility for the continuation, you know what? There's not going to be any more salmon.
Right.
And I mean, everybody knows this. Wood ducks know it. I was really nervous because a bunch of wood ducks came to the pond, as they do every spring, and they were eating, I thought, all the tadpoles. It's like, oh, I got to go out and scare them away or something. I didn't. And they left, and they were here for several days. And afterwards, I went out, and there weren't any tadpoles. I was like, stinking wood ducks. But then I waited another probably 2 or 3 days, and the tadpoles came back up. They just came back up from the bottom where they'd been hiding. And I think, and I'm going to use this phrase, but I want to be really clear that I hate it when the timber industry uses it, and I think that the timber industry is a toxic mimic. But I think the real deal that predators do everywhere is just selective harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you can eat this many tadpoles here, and then you go over there and you can eat that many tadpoles over there. And if you don't do that, then you end up without any tadpoles, and then you starve, and that's not a good thing.
No, absolutely, and I think that when we're talking about treaties, okay, and
mm-hmm.
Which is making sane common cause with all sane, reverent beings, and that's part of my drive also to replace the word environmentalist with sane, reverent people.
Mm-hmm.
Sane, reverent people had this to say. That Janine Benyus did some great stuff at Bioneers also too, as she always does, biomimicry, going, how do we go to the council of nature, in a democratic fashion, asking for advice, and because they're older than we are, and again that treaty of reverence and respect. One of the points she made is that the drive of life is to sustain itself and the life of its offspring and its offspring's offspring. And since we won't be here for our grandchildren, then we make sure the environment is there for them. I mean, that it's so the simplest things make us burst into tears. Like, yeah, that's true. And in that sense, the participation in the cyclical. So the bear does not eat salmon that it does not kill salmon that it's not going to eat. And again that idea of I think it's the model that
or if it does, that's okay too, because the salmon, I mean, that's the deal, is that the salmon are not a feast just for bears, and it ends up that when there is a rich run of salmon, that the bears, all they'll do is they'll grab them and they'll eat just the most tender bits and then throw the rest aside, which is cool, because then the eagles get to take their picking, and then after that the crows get their picking, and then after that the bugs get their picking. And so even when there is this, But the thing is, there's so many salmon in a healthy run that that's perfectly okay.
Yes, and I think there's a part of us still extant underneath everything that knows, and that when we break a treaty, either complicitously with other humans or by ourselves, it does make us crazy.
Yes.
And we want to, just act out in some, just to get away from our guilt, in some way, going, oh, this is wrong, that was really wrong. And maybe you said that you were talking with Dina Metzger also about gold and oil.
Oh, right. Yeah, so okay, in language older than words, the sort of fundamental thesis for the craziness of the culture is that we have a whole culture suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, where we're so traumatized that we can't form relationships. And then in a culture of make-believe, the fundamental precept was, or the fundamental premise was that when you have a society based on competition, you're going to end up, it's going to lead to hatred and atrocity. And then I'm doing a book now about how to take down civilization, and there the fundamental notion is that if you have a city which requires the importation of resources, then you're going to A, never be sustainable, and B, you're going to, your culture will be based on violence, because if you need the resources, you're going to take them if you need them, as opposed to just trade will never be sufficiently reliable. Okay, so the point is that when I finish the big book on taking down civilization, I'm going to jump to another track, and I'm going to go a whole different approach, and it's kind of based on, that's going to be a novel, and it's going to be based on Jack Forbes, an American Indian, wrote this great book called Columbus and Other Cannibals. And his fundamental thesis in there is that the dominant culture suffers from a spiritual illness with a physical vector. And so what that means is if I get the flu and then I cough, and then you pick up the little aerosols go in the air and you pick them up, then you may end up with the chills and upset stomach and all that stuff. But if I have the cannibal sickness and I cough and then you get it, you're going to end up with the cannibal sickness. It's a really, really contagious disease, a spiritual, physical disease. And I love that. And the whole notion, it's going to be that's going to be one of the possibilities there. And another direction, I'm going to jump two more directions with this. And one of them is, when I was about 15, I read about rabies. And it just blew me away because you have, this parasite that gets into the creature's, brain or pituitary or somewhere, and thyroid, and then it causes the skunk to go bite somebody else to pass it on. And I kept thinking when I was 15, who's in charge? And I kept thinking, so what is the skunk thinking as it goes to bite somebody else? Is it thinking, Gandhi, no violence, no violence? Or is it thinking, I hate that guy? Or is it thinking, I have a gift that I need to give? What is he thinking? And so I'm thinking the same thing for us. Maybe, because it's so crazy. It is so crazy. 90%, the phytoplankton is going. 9% of the phytoplankton's gone in the last, 20 years. When you mess with the phytoplankton, it's all over. 13.5 quadrillion lethal doses of plutonium-239. Dioxin every month is breast milk. This doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, so my point is, maybe it's those things. Or here's another thought, and this is the sort of last direction I'll go on this little riff, that in language I talked about, there's one sentence that just intrigued me that I'd read. This Dene man said that uranium gives people radiation sickness because it doesn't want to be picked up.
Yes.
And let's presume that that's not a metaphor, and I don't think it is a metaphor. Mm-hmm. And so if I pick up a rattlesnake, it's going to bite me.
Right.
If I pick up uranium, it's going to give me radiation sickness. And then I was thinking about gold and oil.
Yes, and actually,
go ahead.
Keep thinking about that, because we're going to take a very short break and come right back on oil, gold, and rabies. Our guest today is Derrick Jensen, our great ally, teammate, peer into deep delving. I'm Caroline Casey. Remember, you can keep pledging, even though we're doing an actual show, and we'll be for 10 more minutes before we then go give us money. But 1-800-439-5732 or 510-848-5732 if you support the kind of discourse that Derrick really embodies, and we want to have intelligent public discourse. And we'll be right back.